The chamber was silent as Daniel Carter walked toward the central platform. His footsteps echoed against the polished floor, and every alien eye in the room watched him with a mixture of boredom and barely hidden contempt. The Galactic Council had existed for 12,000 years, and humanity had been part of it for only 150. To the ancient species gathered here, humans were still children playing at diplomacy. Daniel was 58 years old. His hair had turned gray during his 30 years of service to the United Earth Federation. He had spent his entire career smiling at insults, nodding through dismissals, and pretending not to notice when alien diplomats laughed at human representatives behind their backs. Today would be different. Laura Mason stood near the exit, her tablet clutched tightly in her hands. She was Daniel's deputy, a woman of 40 with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. She knew what was coming. She had helped him prepare for this moment over the past 6 months, gathering evidence, documenting every betrayal, and waiting for the right time to act. High sat in the elevated chair at the center of the chamber. His blue skin shimmered under the lights, and his 4 eyes blinked slowly as he regarded Daniel with what might have been curiosity. The had led the council for 3 centuries, and had held the position of High for the past 40 years. He had seen many species come and go. He expected nothing special from this human. Ambassador Al of the Hegemony made no effort to hide his feelings. His reptilian face twisted into a sneer as Daniel took his place at the speaker's circle. The had opposed human membership from the beginning, and Al had spent decades working to undermine Earth's position in galactic affairs. He leaned back in his seat, already preparing to enjoy whatever humiliation the human had planned for himself. Daniel activated the display screen behind him. Numbers and dates appeared, filling the massive wall with information that most council members had never seen collected in one place. 147, Daniel said. His voice was calm and steady. That is the number of human merchant vessels that have been attacked in council space over the past 10 years. Attacked by pirates who somehow always knew our shipping routes, our cargo manifests, and our defensive capabilities. A few murmurs rippled through the chamber, but most representatives simply looked bored. 63, Daniel continued. That is the number of formal complaints we filed regarding these attacks. Every single one was dismissed without investigation. He changed the display. New information appeared. 212 million credits. That is the amount of humanitarian aid Earth has provided to council species over the past 50 years. Medical supplies, food shipments, disaster relief. We gave freely because we believed in cooperation. Al laughed openly. Is this what you have come to do? Beg for gratitude like a servant expecting praise from his masters? Several other representatives chuckled at the comment. Daniel did not react. He simply changed the display again. 340, he said. His voice remained steady, but something in his eyes had changed. That is the number of people who died on the medical frigate Mercy's Hope 3 months ago. They were responding to a distress signal from a damaged vessel. When they arrived, they found not a ship in need but an ambush. Pirates destroyed them with military-grade weapons that only 3 species in this council have access to. The chamber grew quieter. Among the dead were 112 children, Daniel continued. They were students on a training mission, learning to become doctors and nurses so they could help others across the galaxy. The youngest was 14 years old. He paused and looked directly at Al. We requested an investigation. The council refused. We requested access to sensor logs from nearby stations. The council refused. We requested permission to conduct our own investigation. The council refused. Shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Ambassador Carter, these matters have been reviewed according to proper procedure. The council determined there was insufficient evidence to warrant further action. Insufficient evidence, Daniel repeated slowly. 340 dead humans, and you found insufficient evidence. He turned off the display and stood in silence for a long moment. The chamber had grown very still. For 150 years, humanity has tried to be good partners in this community. We shared our technology. We opened our borders. We sent our doctors to heal your sick and our engineers to build your infrastructure. We asked for nothing in return except to be treated with basic respect. Laura Mason watched from her position near the door. Her heart was pounding, but her face showed nothing. "We were patient when you mocked our culture," Daniel said. "We were patient when you excluded us from important decisions. We were patient when your merchants cheated our traders and your courts ruled against us regardless of evidence. We believed that if we simply proved ourselves worthy, you would eventually accept us as equals." He shook his head slowly. "We were wrong." The silence in the chamber was complete now. Even Al had stopped smirking. Effective immediately, the United Earth Federation is withdrawing from the Galactic Council. All diplomatic relations with Council species are hereby terminated. Human space is now closed to all non-human vessels. Any ship attempting to enter without authorization will be turned back. Any ship that refuses to turn back will be disabled and its crew detained. Rose from his chair. "Ambassador Carter, you cannot simply withdraw. There are treaties, obligations, procedures that must be followed." Daniel looked at him with something that might have been pity. "We followed your procedures for 150 years. They led us nowhere. Today we stop following." He turned and began walking toward the exit where Laura waited. "You are making a mistake," Al called out, his voice filled with contempt. "You humans think you matter, but you are nothing. The Council existed for 12,000 years before you crawled out of your little planet. We will not even notice you are gone." Daniel stopped at the doorway. He turned and looked back at the assembled representatives one final time. "I hope you are right, Ambassador Al. For your sake, I truly hope you are right." Then he walked out, and Laura followed him. The doors closed behind them with a soft sound that somehow seemed louder than any explosion. In the chamber, the silence stretched on. Slowly sat back down, his 4 eyes blinking rapidly as his mind tried to process what had just happened. "Well," one of the minor ambassadors finally said, "at least we will not have to listen to their complaints anymore." Nervous laughter filled the room, and within minutes, the council had moved on to other business. The humans were gone, and good riddance to them. They had no idea what was coming. 3 weeks passed, and the galaxy continued to turn. The Galactic Council held its regular sessions, passed its regular resolutions, and conducted its regular business. The empty seats where human representatives once sat were quickly removed, and within days it was as if humanity had never been part of the chamber at all. Hai felt relieved. The humans had always been difficult, always asking questions, always demanding explanations for decisions that were none of their concern. Now the council could return to the way things had been for thousands of years before those strange, short-lived creatures had stumbled into the stars. The first sign of trouble came from the medical consortium. Trade Minister burst into his private office without announcement, his thin body trembling and his large eyes wide with panic. "We have a problem," said, "a serious problem." Set down his reading tablet with a sigh. "What is it now?" "The humans have stopped shipping medical supplies. So, find another supplier." Made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "Hi, there is no other supplier. Human medical technology has been the foundation of galactic healthcare for 80 years. They manufacture 60% of all pharmaceutical compounds used by Council species. Their diagnostic equipment is in every hospital on every major world. Their vaccines have eliminated diseases that once killed millions." Felt the first small stirring of concern. Surely other species can produce these things. "We have tried. Their manufacturing processes are proprietary. Their formulas are protected. And even if we could figure out how to make these things ourselves, It would take years to build the facilities and train the workers. The High was quiet for a long moment. What are you telling me? I am telling you that in 6 months, hospitals across Council space will begin running out of essential medications. In a year, we will face healthcare shortages that could kill millions. On Earth, Secretary General Amy Turner stood before a massive window in the orbital command center. Below her, the blue and green planet turned slowly, beautiful and peaceful. Behind her, dozens of screens showed activity across human space as ships were recalled, borders were secured, and a civilization began the process of turning inward. Admiral Brooks stood beside her, his uniform crisp and his expression calm. He had commanded Earth's defensive fleet for 15 years, and he had spent most of that time pretending to be weaker than he was. The Council species believed humanity's military was small and primitive. They believed this because humanity had wanted them to believe it. 17 unauthorized border crossings in the past week, Brooks reported. Mostly merchant vessels trying to maintain their usual routes. We turned them all back with warning shots. Any resistance? One cruiser refused to stop. We disabled their engines with a precision strike and towed them back to the border. Their crew was unharmed but very confused. They had no idea we could target individual systems from that range. Amy nodded slowly, and the crew? Detained briefly, questioned and released. We returned their ship after repairs. Good, we are not at war with anyone. We simply want to be left alone. Brooks hesitated before speaking again. Madam Secretary, how long do you intend to maintain this isolation? Amy turned to face him. As long as necessary, Admiral. For 150 years we gave everything we had to a community that treated us like servants. We healed their sick, fed their hungry, built their infrastructure and protected their trade routes. And in return they laughed at us. They stole from us. They killed our people and then refused to even investigate. Her voice remained steady, but Brooks could see the pain in her eyes. 340 people died on the Mercy's Hope, children died, and the Council could not be bothered to care, so now we stop giving, we stop sharing, we stop helping, and we see how long it takes them to notice what they have lost. Across the galaxy, the noticing had already begun. On Prime, the central hub of the hegemony, factories that had operated continuously for centuries suddenly fell silent. Human engineers had designed the automation systems that ran those factories. When the engineers left, they took their expertise with them, and within weeks, critical systems began failing with no one qualified to repair them. On the agricultural world of IV, crops rotted in the fields. Human logistics networks had coordinated the transportation of food across 100 systems. Without those networks, farmers had no way to get their products to market, and cities that had relied on off-world food imports began rationing. On the space station Nexus Prime, where the Galactic Council met, the lights flickered one evening and did not stop flickering for 3 days. The station's power grid had been upgraded by human engineers 20 years ago. No one else understood how it worked. Trade Minister tried desperately to reach Earth through unofficial channels. He sent messages through neutral parties, through old contacts, through anyone who might still have a connection to human space. Every response was the same, an automated message stating that all diplomatic communication had been suspended indefinitely. Called an emergency session of the Council. For the first time in his 40 years as High, the chamber was filled not with boredom but with genuine fear. "This is unacceptable," Al declared, his reptilian voice harsh with anger. "The humans cannot simply cut themselves off from the galaxy. We must demand they resume their obligations." "Demand," Ambassador of the spoke up. She was young for only 200 years old, and she had always been more sympathetic to humans than most of her colleagues. "And if they refuse our demands, what then? Will we send a strongly worded letter?" "We will send a fleet," Al snapped. The chamber fell silent. The humans have made themselves clear, continued. They do not want war. They simply want to be left alone. If we attack them, we become the aggressors. And frankly, after what we have done to them, can we blame them for wanting distance? Al turned on her with fury in his eyes. You would defend them after they have abandoned us. I would point out that we abandoned them first. We abandoned them when we ignored their complaints. We abandoned them when we refused to investigate the murder of their people. We abandoned them every day for 150 years when we treated them like inferior beings instead of equal partners. No one knew what to say to that. In the silence, finally understood what Daniel Carter had meant in his final words. The human had hoped, truly hoped, that the Council would not notice humanity's absence. Because if they did notice, it would mean that everything the Council had believed about humans being unimportant was wrong. And if that was wrong, what else might they have been wrong about? The High looked around the chamber at his fellow representatives. He saw fear in their eyes, confusion, and the first stirrings of something that might have been regret. It was too late for regret. The humans were gone, and they were not coming back. Not until the galaxy learned to treat them with the respect they had always deserved. Wondered how long that lesson would take to learn. He suspected it would be very painful. 2 months after humanity closed its borders, a plague broke out on 3 colony worlds. The disease was not new. It had existed for centuries, and there was a cure. The problem was that the cure was manufactured exclusively on Earth, in facilities that human scientists had built and human workers operated. Without access to those facilities, millions of citizens faced death from a sickness that should have been easily treatable. Al stood before the Galactic Council and demanded action. The humans are committing genocide, he declared. By withholding medicine, they are deliberately killing our people. This is an act of war, and we must respond accordingly. Shook her head slowly. The humans are not withholding medicine. They are simply not shipping it outside their borders. There is a difference. My people are dying. Where is the difference in that? The difference is that we spent decades attacking their ships, stealing their technology, and treating them like servants. The difference is that when they asked for justice after 340 of their people were murdered, we refused to even investigate. The difference, Ambassador Al, is that we created this situation, not them. On a small medical station near the border of Council space, a human doctor named Cole worked 20-hour shifts trying to save lives with rapidly dwindling supplies. Was 35 years old. He had been stationed on the neutral medical station for 3 years, providing care to species from across the galaxy. When Earth recalled its citizens, he had been given a choice: return home or stay and help. He had chosen to stay. Now he was one of only a handful of humans remaining in Council space, and he was watching patients die from conditions that would have been simple to treat just months ago. Dr. Cole, his assistant, said, "We have another transport arriving, 47 patients from the colonies." Closed his eyes for a moment. The station had beds for 60 patients. They already had 53. "Find room for them," he said. "Put beds in the hallways if you have to. We are almost out of the basic antiviral. Once it is gone, there is nothing more we can do for the plague victims." "I know," opened his eyes and looked at the young. "We do what we can with what we have. When we run out, we keep them comfortable. That is all we can do." Word of Cole spread across Council space. Here was a human who had every reason to leave, every reason to abandon the species that had mistreated his people for generations, and yet he stayed. He worked himself to exhaustion. He held the hands of dying patients who had probably laughed at humans their entire lives. He showed kindness to those who had never shown kindness to his kind. The aliens did not understand him. They could not understand why someone would sacrifice so much for strangers who had given him nothing but contempt. Back on Earth, Commander Sophie Grant patrolled the border in her sleek patrol vessel. She was 29 years old, one of the youngest officers in the fleet, and she took her duty seriously. No unauthorized vessels would cross into human space on her watch. The distress signal came at 3 in the morning, station time. Sophie pulled up the sensor readings and frowned. A transport ship was drifting near the border, its engines failing and its life support systems showing critical damage. There were over 200 people on board, including children. "Commander," her navigator said, "the ship is still in Council space. Technically, they are not our problem." Sophie stared at the readings for a long moment. The transport would lose life support completely within 6 hours. If no one helped them, everyone on board would die. "Plot an intercept course," she said quietly. "Commander, that would mean crossing into Council space. We would be violating our own border restrictions." "I'm aware of that. Plot the course." Sophie's ship reached the transport within an hour. Her crew worked quickly, transferring emergency supplies, spare parts, and medical equipment. They repaired the damaged life support system and stabilized the failing engines. The captain stood on his bridge, watching the humans work with an expression of complete confusion. "Why?" he asked Sophie when she came aboard to check on the passengers. "Why are you helping us? After everything we have done to your people, why would you risk your career to save us?" Sophie looked at the children huddled with their parents, frightened and confused but alive. She thought about the children who had died on the Mercy's Hope, and she felt a familiar pain in her chest. "Because this is who we are," she said simply. "This is who we have always been. We help, even when it costs us. Even when those we help do not deserve it, we help because it is right." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "I hope someday your people will understand that. I hope someday you will realize what you threw away when you pushed us out." The galactic banking network collapsed on a Tuesday. For 8,000 years, the network had managed financial transactions across Council space. It was the backbone of interstellar commerce, the system that made trade between species possible, and it had been designed, built, and maintained by human engineers. When those engineers left, they took their knowledge with them. The network continued running on automated systems for several weeks, but when the first major error occurred, there was no one qualified to fix it. The error cascaded through connected systems, and within 72 hours, the entire network was offline. Trade stopped. Payments could not be processed. Contracts could not be fulfilled. Species that depended on imports suddenly found themselves unable to buy anything from anyone. On IV, the food shortages became critical. Riots broke out in major cities as hungry citizens demanded that their government do something, anything, to restore the supply chains that had collapsed. On Prime, the death toll from the plague reached 100,000 and continued climbing. Hospitals that had once been state-of-the-art facilities were now little more than warehouses for the dying. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 15th time in 2 months. The chamber that had once been filled with confidence and condescension was now filled with fear and desperation. Hai looked older than he had 2 months ago. His blue skin had faded to a pale gray, and his 4 eyes no longer held their usual sharp intelligence. He had spent his career believing that the Council was the center of the galaxy, that the ancient species who gathered here were the masters of everything that mattered. He understood now how wrong he had been. "We must reach out to the humans," he said, his voice tired and defeated. "We must apologize. We must offer whatever they want to bring them back." Al slammed his fist on the table. "We will not beg those creatures for help. We are the Galactic Council. We have existed for 12,000 years. We do not need humans." "Then why are your people dying, Ambassador?" asked quietly. "If we do not need humans, why is your economy collapsing? Why are your factories silent? Why are your hospitals running out of medicine?" Had no answer. In the silence that followed, finally acknowledged what he should have understood a long time ago. The humans had never been the junior partners they pretended to be. They had been holding the galaxy together for a century, quietly doing the work that no one else wanted to do, asking nothing in return except basic respect. And now that they were gone, everything was falling apart. Said slowly, "You have shown sympathy for the humans in the past. I want you to travel to their border. Find someone who will talk to you. Tell them we are ready to listen." Nodded, "I will do what I can, but I cannot promise anything. We have given them very little reason to trust us." "I know," said, "but we must try, before there is nothing left to save." 4 months after humanity from the Galactic Council, the formal apology arrived at Earth's border. It was written on official council stationery, signed by High himself, and delivered by a special diplomatic courier. The document acknowledged past wrongs, expressed regret for the treatment humans had received, and requested immediate resumption of diplomatic relations. Secretary General Amy Turner read the apology carefully. Then she drafted a response of exactly one sentence. "Apologies require actions, not words." That was all. No negotiation, no counteroffer, no sign that Earth was willing to discuss anything further. The response drove Al into a rage. The ambassador had watched his people suffer for months, and his pride would not allow him to accept that this was his own fault. In his mind, the humans were the aggressors. They were using their economic power as a weapon, and weapons could be answered with weapons. War Minister OK was a military leader of the old school. He believed in strength, in dominance, in showing enemies the consequences of defiance. When Al came to him with a proposal, he listened carefully. "The humans are bluffing," Al insisted. "They have always been a minor military power. Their fleet is small. Their weapons are primitive. They from the council because they knew they could not compete with us directly. If we show them force, they will back down." OK considered this. Everything he knew about humans suggested they were a peaceful species, more interested in trade and diplomacy than warfare. Their military had always seemed weak compared to the great powers of the council. "What do you propose?" he asked. "Assemble a fleet, 200 warships, jump to their border and demand they restore trade relations immediately. If they refuse, we destroy their border stations and push into their space. Once they see our strength, they will surrender." The war fleet launched 3 days later. On Earth, Admiral Brooks watched the sensor readings with calm interest. 200 warships in formation, heading directly for the border. They were not being subtle about their intentions. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the enemy fleet will reach the border in 4 hours. Orders." Brooks turned to look at Daniel Carter, who had been called out of retirement to advise on the situation. The old diplomat stood quietly in the corner of the command center, his face unreadable. "What do you think, Ambassador?" Brooks asked. Daniel considered the question carefully. "They believe we are weak. They have believed this for 150 years because we chose to let them believe it. We smiled at their insults. We accepted their contempt. We never showed them what we could really do. And now we show them, but we do it without unnecessary bloodshed. We want them to understand our strength, not hate us for using it cruelly." Brooks nodded slowly. "I understand." When the fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the border of human space, they expected to find a handful of patrol vessels and perhaps a few defensive platforms. What they found instead made War Minister OK freeze in his command chair. Thousands of defensive platforms hung in perfect formation, each one bristling with weapon systems they had never seen before. Behind them, a fleet of human warships waited in silent readiness. Not the small, outdated vessels the Council had always assumed humans possessed, but sleek, modern ships that radiated power and confidence. "What is this?" OK whispered. Before anyone could answer, a communication came through on all frequencies. A calm human voice spoke clearly. "Attention fleet. You are approaching the border of United Earth Federation space. You are not authorized to proceed. Turn back now and no action will be taken against you. Continue forward and you will be disabled and detained. You have 5 minutes to comply." OK felt his blood surge with anger. Disabled and detained. By humans, the arrogance was unbelievable. "All ships forward," he commanded. "Show these creatures what warriors are capable of." The fleet began moving. Admiral Brooks watched the enemy advance on his screens. He felt no anger, no hatred, no desire for revenge. He simply felt tired, tired of being underestimated, tired of pretending to be less than he was, tired of watching his people die while the galaxy laughed. "Activate Defense Grid 7, he said quietly. The fleet was halfway to the border when every system on every ship suddenly went dead. Navigation failed, weapons went offline, engines sputtered and stopped, communication arrays fell silent. 200 warships representing the pride of the military drifted helplessly in the void. OK stared at his darkened bridge in complete shock. What happened? What did they do? On the human command ship, Brooks watched the results with grim satisfaction. The electromagnetic pulse weapons had worked exactly as designed. Decades of secret development, hidden from Council observation, had produced technology that could disable entire fleets without killing a single crew member. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "all enemy vessels are disabled. No casualties detected. Send recovery teams, tow them back to the border, repair their basic systems so they can make it home. And the crews? Detain them briefly, question them to make sure this was not the beginning of a larger invasion, then release them." Daniel Carter spoke up from his corner. "Admiral, I recommend we send a message with the released crews, something they will not forget." "What did you have in mind?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Tell them this, we do not want war, we want to be left alone. The next fleet will not be returned." The message spread across the galaxy within days. The mighty war fleet, 200 ships strong, had been defeated without a single human firing a lethal weapon. The humans had simply turned them off like malfunctioning machines and sent them home with a warning. Species that had considered humanity weak suddenly realized they had been seeing only what humans chose to show them. For 150 years, humans had hidden their true capabilities, had played the role of junior partners while secretly developing technology that surpassed anything the Council possessed. Why would they hide such power? Understood. She had spent weeks at the human border, talking to anyone who would listen, trying to understand the species her people had so badly misjudged. They hid their power because they did not want to rule, she explained to the Council upon her return. They wanted to be partners, not masters. They believed that if they simply proved their value through kindness and contribution, the galaxy would eventually accept them as equals. They were willing to be patient for centuries if necessary. I listened with growing horror, and we pushed them away. We did more than that. We mocked them for their patience. We exploited their kindness. We killed their children and then told them it did not matter. We took everything they offered and gave them nothing but contempt in return." The chamber was silent. "What do they want now?" asked. "They want accountability, full investigation of every attack on human vessels, prosecution of those responsible, reparations to the families of the Mercy's Hope victims, and permanent human veto power over any Council decisions affecting Earth." Al erupted. "Outrageous. We will never agree to such terms." Looked at him coldly. "Then your people will continue to die, Ambassador, because without human medicine, human technology, and human cooperation, the hegemony will collapse within a year, and we both know it." The fracturing began that very day. Species that had once presented a united front against human demands now began negotiating separately. The signed a private treaty with Earth. The followed. Then the. One by one, the members of the Galactic Council abandoned the institution that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years, choosing survival over pride. And in his chambers, Hai sat alone, finally understanding the truth he had been too arrogant to see. The humans had never been the children. They had been the adults in the room, tolerating the tantrums of ancient species who should have known better. And now the adults had lost their patience. The galaxy would never be the same. 8 months after humanity from the Galactic Council, the galaxy looked completely different. The Council, as it had existed for 12,000 years, was gone. The chamber on Nexus Prime stood empty most days, its ancient seats gathering dust, while the species that had once filled them struggled to rebuild their shattered civilizations individually. The dream of a unified galactic government had died not with a bang, but with the quiet closing of a door. In its place, something new was beginning to form. 12 species had signed individual treaties with Earth, each one negotiated separately, each one built on terms of genuine equality. They had access to human medicine again, and their people were no longer dying from preventable diseases. They had food shipments flowing to their colonies, and the riots in their cities had ended. Even some worlds had reached out through back channels, desperate to save themselves from the collapse their own leaders had caused. The hegemony itself had not survived, had been removed from power by his own people, his name now a curse word on tongues. The species that had once been the most vocal opponents of humanity had fractured into a dozen smaller states, each one scrambling to distance itself from the actions of the old regime. Secretary General Amy Turner stood before the glass wall of her office, watching a ship approach Earth's orbital station. It was a vessel, carrying the first official delegation to visit human space in 8 months, and at the head of that delegation was Hai himself. No Hai had ever traveled to Earth before. For 12,000 years, other species had come to the Council, never the other way around. The fact that was making this journey personally spoke volumes about how much had changed. Laura Mason, now Secretary of Interstellar Affairs, entered the office with a tablet in her hand. The ship has docked, is asking for a private audience before the formal negotiations begin. Amy nodded slowly. Granted, I want Daniel there as well. Daniel Carter had come out of retirement permanently now. His experience and his steady presence had proven invaluable during the crisis, and Amy had appointed him as special advisor for interstellar relations. He was the one who had started this transformation, and it seemed right that he should be present as it reached its conclusion. The meeting took place in a small conference room with no decorations, no ceremonial displays, no attempts to impress. Just a table, some chairs, and 3 humans facing one alien who had traveled a very long way to say something difficult. Looked older than Daniel remembered. The Hai's blue skin had lost its shimmer, and his 4 eyes seemed tired, even sad. He moved slowly, carefully, like someone carrying a great weight. Secretary General Turner began, his voice quiet. Ambassador Carter, Secretary Mason, thank you for receiving me. Amy gestured to a chair. Please sit, you have come a long way. Settled into the seat with visible relief. He was silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts, choosing his words carefully. I have come to offer an apology, he said finally. Not the formal apology we sent before, written by diplomats and approved by committees. A personal apology from me for the failures of my leadership. Daniel leaned forward slightly. We are listening, Hai. For 40 years I led the Galactic Council. I believed that I understood the galaxy, that I knew how things worked, that the ancient wisdom of my people gave me insight that younger species could not possess. His voice trembled slightly. I was wrong, about everything. He looked directly at Amy. When your people first joined the council, I saw you as children, curious, energetic, but ultimately unimportant. I thought you would learn your place in time, that you would accept the role we assigned you. I never considered that you might have something to teach us instead. And what have we taught you? Amy asked. Humility, compassion, the strength that comes from helping others even when they do not deserve it. Paused. I have spent much time these past months learning about Dr. Cole, the human doctor who stayed behind when all others left. He worked himself to exhaustion saving lives, including many who had treated his kind with nothing but contempt. I could not understand why he would do such a thing. And do you understand now? I think I am beginning to. He did it because kindness is not a transaction to your species. You do not help others in exchange for gratitude or reward. You help because you believe it is right, because you cannot look at suffering and turn away. His voice cracked. We exploited that kindness for 150 years. We took it for granted. We assumed it meant you were weak, when in truth it was the greatest strength you possessed. The room was silent for a long moment. I cannot undo what has been done, continued. I cannot bring back the 340 people who died on your medical ship. I cannot erase the decades of insults and injustices your people endured. All I can offer is my word that I understand now, and that I will spend whatever time remains in my life trying to build something better. Daniel spoke softly. What exactly are you proposing, High? The old council is dead. Good riddance to it. But the galaxy still needs cooperation, still needs a framework for species to work together. I am proposing a new organization, built on different principles. Not a hierarchy with ancient species at the top and young species at the bottom, but a true partnership of equals. He looked at each of the humans in turn. I am asking if humanity will help us build it, not as junior members begging for acceptance, but as founding partners, as leaders who can teach us how to be better. Amy exchanged glances with Daniel and Laura. This was what they had hoped for, what they had worked toward during 8 long months of silence and isolation. Not conquest, not dominance, just recognition at last that humanity deserved to stand as equals. We will need guarantees, Amy said. Full accountability for past wrongs, real consequences for those who attacked our people. You will have them. And our voice must carry weight. No more decisions made without our input, no more dismissal of our concerns. Humanity will have veto power over any major decision. Your agreement will be required before any significant action can be taken. Laura looked up from her tablet. These terms are acceptable as a starting point. We can work out the details in formal negotiations. Nodded slowly, then there is hope. 3 days later, the first authorized alien vessel in 8 months passed through Earth's border carrying not threats but diplomats seeking partnership. Dr. Cole was aboard that vessel, finally returning home after months of selfless service to species that had once despised his kind. A crowd had gathered at the docking bay to welcome him. Stepped off the ship looking thin and exhausted, but when he saw the faces waiting for him, he smiled. I just did my job, he said when reporters asked him about his time in council space. Any human would have done the same. And perhaps that was the point, Daniel Carter thought as he watched from a distance. Any human would have done the same. That was what made humanity special. Not their technology, not their military power, not their economic might. Simply their stubborn refusal to abandon kindness even when kindness was never returned. The formal signing ceremony took place 1 month later in a new chamber built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from 12 species stood together as the charter for the reformed Galactic Assembly was officially adopted. At the center of the document, in the position of highest honor, was the signature of Secretary General Amy Turner. Daniel Carter stood at the back of the room, watching the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Laura Mason found him there, a slight smile on her face. You started all this, she said. Walking out of that chamber 8 months ago, telling them exactly what we thought of them, that took courage. Daniel shook his head. Walking away is not courage. Having the strength to come back, to try again, to believe that things can be better even after everything that happened, that is courage. And we did not do it alone. Every human who kept showing kindness when cruelty would have been easier, every doctor who healed alien patients, every soldier who spared alien lives, they are the ones who proved what humanity really is. He looked at the new plaque being mounted on the chamber wall. It listed the founding species of the reformed Galactic Assembly, and at the top of that list, no longer buried at the bottom among the junior members, was a single word: humanity. We spent 150 years trying to earn their respect through patience and service, Daniel said softly. In the end, we earned it by finally respecting ourselves enough to walk away. Laura nodded. And now? Now we see if they truly learned the lesson. If they can treat us as equals, we will be the best partners they have ever had. And if they cannot, well, Daniel smiled slightly, we know the way to the door. Above them, through the transparent ceiling of the chamber, the stars stretched out in endless possibility. For the first time in 150 years, humanity looked at those stars not as supplicants hopping for acceptance, but as equals ready to help shape the future of the galaxy. It had taken walking away to find their place. But they had found it at last.